Welcome to the Growth Enablement Madness podcast, and I'm Jim Ward, your host, CEO of BrainCell, the Growth Enablement Company. I'm absolutely mad about helping businesses grow and scale. And in this podcast, my team and I get a chance to talk shop with industry thought leaders about a variety of growth enablement strategies, stories, and technology trends. I'm happy that you're here, so let's get the growth conversation started. Welcome, folks. This is Jim Ward, and this is the Growth Enablement Madness podcast. We have a terrific guest today. I know I always say that, but this really is a terrific guest. They're all terrific, right? Anyways, right, Sarah, aren't they?
Always.
Always terrific. But this is a subject that I got to tell you, I'm really passionate about. And I've been reading, of course, I read quite a bit, and this is something we're actually doing and instituting within our company. And this is something our guest is going to be actually working with us on. He's going to introduce himself shortly, but as we sort of create some anticipation as to who it is, this discussion is going to be around OKRs and what they are and how they can help your company meet your growth and sales or efficiencies. But to my soul, after reading Measure What Matters, Radical Focus, I am so into this that I think where we're going with OKRs is going to help us get to the next level of our company growth. So I want to share this information with all of you, our listeners, because I think you'll find a great deal of information that you'll get from it that you might want to take on this journey, perhaps with us at some point, because we're hoping to use this also in our software implementations. As they say, without further ado, Alex Bartholomaus. And the company name is?
People Stretch Solutions.
There you go. Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, well, appreciate it. It's great to be here. CEO, our firm's based in the Washington, D.C. area. Among the things that we do, OKRs, strategy, goal setting, really passionate about leadership development, employee engagement, and sales effectiveness as well. And we've been at it now right about to hit our 15th anniversary. So we work with different industries, helping them. And the biggest part of our business is OKRs. And we've been doing that specifically now almost 9 years. We're about to hit an epic milestone of 100 implementations. And we're excited about what we've been able to see working with leaders at different levels with organizations from as large as SAP, Colgate-Palmolive, down to startups, nonprofits. Any organization can use OKRs, and we're going to go into the reasons why it is such a dynamic and flexible framework for goal setting.
Thanks, Alex. And our podcasts have often centered around technology that helps companies grow and scale, or talking to authors and their ideas about growth and scale. This is something you can use, well, with or without technology, but we'll talk about the technologies that do support it. And we're not selling anything, by the way. We're just trying to teach you how to grow your company. And hopefully you'll get some really great ideas today. But before we start, I love to start with an icebreaker question. And Alex, my question to you is, if you could have one superpower, invisible man, read people's minds, any superpower that you can think of, what would it be?
I'd want to be able to fly as fast as Superman because I love to travel. And man, would that make traveling a whole lot easier?
A good one.
That's a good one, I guess, but you're going to have to go through rain, snow. Why not just transport there? Why not take the transporter? Sorry, never mind. It was your decision. I can't get it.
So my father's a traveler, mom was a traveler, brother's a traveler. And from a superpower perspective, I think Nightcrawler can kind of jump from one place to another. But part of the beauty is the journey. So I'm willing to take the bad weather for the view and the speed.
And the bullets, because you're going to get shot, right? There's no doubt about that. But you're not going to be hurt. By the way, before we start with some of the questions, I made mention of a couple of books. I'll give John Doerr a shout out here. Great book. And then this is one that you, Alex, suggested, I believe, Christina Watke, I think, hopefully I say that name correctly, Radical Focus.
Yes.
So I've taken your suggestion. Everybody here is reading them. Oh, look and see. Everybody, that's true. I do not tell a lie. All right. So, we've gotten to this point. You're doing People Stretch. Tell me a little bit about how you got here. What's your background? You've been doing this for 15 years. What were you doing before People Stretch?
Thank you for asking. So, once upon a time, I went to undergrad for business. And so I had grown up in a family business. My dad was a wine importer. And so when I graduated, I had a choice of either taking a job back then with AOL or going to work for my old man. And my dad was at a point where the business needed help. It was cheap labor. So I was happy I joined the family business, and we ended up making a great team, and we ended up building that business from 1 million to 37 million before we finally exited in '09. And as a wine importer, you have to really build a lot of different competencies. So on one hand, we were really good at logistics. We were also really good at sales, marketing, data analytics. In the United States, if you import wine, you have to sell through wholesalers, and managing channel sales isn't easy. And so we combined a unique sales effectiveness, but also we used data to really understand where we were good and where we needed to be. So those were all kind of like my origin story of developing these competencies in sales effectiveness, leadership development, strategy, goal setting, and even data analytics. All those things were big reasons why we were able to build Billington before we sold it. And after working for the acquirer for a year, it was an easy transition to hang my shingle and blinked, and lo and behold, it's been almost 15 years that I've been doing this.
I know the feeling. I share without spending too much time on this, I worked for a family business too out of college and really learned the foundation of everything I'm doing today. And of course, we all evolve from there. But yeah, I share that. And it was a great opportunity to be with my dad and work with him. So that's a great story. So what was it that made you realize you needed to start this company? And was this company doing OKRs from the start, or have you evolved?
So there were two critical milestones in Billington that kind of led me to this business. So in 2003, I was in New Zealand, and we were looking at potentially getting into that segment as a wine importer. And that trip roughly coincided a couple years after my mom had passed. And I probably, we had been growing pretty consistently for the previous 9 years, average 30% growth each year. We were starting to run into some real strong headwinds. And I really reflected on, okay, what do I have to do as a leader to really make a difference? And the determination I made is I really had to let go and get out of the weeds and really start working on the business as opposed to in the business.
Yep.
So I vividly remember being in New Zealand, in South Island, and just thinking about it and having that aha moment. And it was almost like a weight lifted off my shoulder because I was the roadblock. And the moment I realized I just needed to be a better leader and empower my team, I was able to make that transition. And so fast forward to 2008, when my dad and I were thinking about exiting, after the first conversation, I asked myself while I was reflecting on it, what am I going to do?
Right. I remember that reflection, by the way.
Exactly. And so it didn't take very long to answer the question. I want to help others go through the journey that I just went through because of how powerful it was to just get out of the weeds, work on the business. And if I could create a business that allowed me to balance talking about sales, talking about strategy, talking about leadership, then that was going to be a very sustainable next act. And I've been at this now 15 years. I think it's been working for me. You asked, did I do OKRs from the start? And the answer is no, because I wasn't aware of OKRs. We practiced a lot of the tenets of OKRs from the standpoint of I got clear on goals. I tried to get anyone I worked with aligned with me. But what I recognized, especially getting a new business off the ground, it was painful because the motion of how to do that isn't natural. Some people are better at it than others. And so, roughly about, I'd say almost 9 years ago, a colleague said, "Hey, Alex, I know your vision and you should really check out OKRs because I think that might be the thing that you might be missing and you might be interested by it." So, I took started doing some research. And like you, Jim, I knew immediately this was it. Like this was something that satiated my need for metrics, but it also satiated an important need for collaboration and really teams working up and down and across. And I'll talk more about how it's a team sport. An important lesson I learned building the family business is when it stopped being about kind of Alex the superhero and it turned into the team. We continue to do some amazing things at bigger scale. And so I think with OKRs, it provides leaders that opportunity depending where they are in their journey.
Yeah, and the history of this, I think, is the precursor is MBO. Is that right? Management by Objective.
Yeah.
And then was it Andy Grove who really was the, what would you call him?
Yes, he is the
Father of OKRs.
The godfather of OKRs.
The godfather.
Right.
He is the OG. I mean, I think he, starting in the 70s, started talking about it informally in a book he wrote. And then obviously he gave it more structure and started using it in the early 80s. And so Doerr talks about this evolution. But you look at Grove's track record at Intel, I think he took a company that when he was CEO, it grew from 3 billion to 97 billion in market cap. And this was his system that he wanted his leaders every quarter to articulate what was important and why it was important. But he also wanted them to get out of their comfort zone by setting these very measurable outcomes. And it didn't need to be like unrealistic, but it needed to be out of their comfort zone. So I think that's resonated with a lot of leaders like yourself, that they want to help their teams realize their potential, that they just don't have the right framework.
We'll talk about what they are and how they compare to KPIs and MBOs. But just as I'm thinking about our team and others, I just think it brings together. We're an EOS company. We have scorecards, for example. And that was a great thing that happened. It was also one of those things that resonated with me when I read it and we implemented it and we've had great success with it. But then I started to think, well, folks here in the team submit scorecards. It becomes a weekly sort of check the box and get it in. And I don't know that they feel an ownership as they will with an OKR framework. So tell us a little bit about what OKRs are and how they differ from KPIs and MBOs.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, OKRs, objectives and key results. The intent is that the objective is a statement. The statement is comprised of a what and a why. I think that's an important point of differentiation because you might talk to people out in business and they'll say, oh yeah, you have to have objectives. But if someone's talking about objectives outside the framework of OKRs, they're actually talking about SMART goals. They're talking about something that is a what, but it also includes some measurable component. When we think about objectives in the component of O's and KRs, the objective shouldn't have a number. That's for the key results. And a lot of organizations struggle to decompose work. So they're good at annual goal setting, but the purpose of OKRs is to break it down at a quarterly level. And so when you move from annual to quarterly, a lot of organizations get a lift in their acceleration because they're just taking it 3 months at a time. And so I think it's pretty powerful when you can take it in 3-month increments and actually complete something, as opposed to 3 months in, I'm on track. I'm on track doesn't mean anything relative to an annual goal. So it's actually very unsatiating to be on track for some people. In a quarterly framework, blow away your first quarter goal, you celebrate, and then you worry about the next one. And I think people appreciate the shorter term horizon. Certainly I'm the first person to say I can be guilty of a little ADD. So there's nothing like a shorter time period to keep my attention. I think when you compare it to like KPIs, which is one of the most frequent questions we get, a KPI, it could be a leading indicator, it could be a lagging indicator. And I think there's a time and a place for a leading indicator and a lagging indicator. In the case of OKRs, a good key result tends to be a lagging indicator. And it's a lagging indicator that you accomplish the objective. Now, Do I think KPIs and OKRs, they can live in harmony? And sometimes in a Venn diagram example, there's overlap of those lagging KPIs. They could very well be someone's KRs. But I think leading indicators, I think are necessary, especially for organizations and environments that are trying to drive efficiency. So I think paying attention to leading indicators, that's an important component for growth in areas where operational efficiency really matters.
For the listening audience, I want to apologize. Oftentimes when we're in the weeds, we get used to these acronyms that we're assuming people know. And OKRs, just to be clear, stand for objectives and key results. And there's a framework around what the objectives are and then what the key results are. And of course, KPIs are key performance indicators. Some people use scorecards. In the vernacular of EOS would be scorecards. And then MBOs would be management by objective. So there's elements, if you know all of them, that you'll see them in the OKR framework, but it to me is evolutionary. And if you read these books or you listen to this podcast, hopefully it'll start to become clear how it can affect the business in a very positive way. That's not to say it doesn't come without challenges, which we'll talk about that later. Tell me about how do OKRs, objective key results, help organizations grow from the bottom up and top down? Because it's both.
It is, it very much is. So in the beginning, it starts at the top. That's unavoidable. I actually think, and I know that sometimes some organizations try to do a shotgun start where everyone begins. And I think that's where it's really tricky to be successful. I was talking to a company this morning and they've got 80 people and they're trying to have all 80 people write OKRs at once. And I give them credit. They hadn't engaged with an OKR expert yet. And they realized that when the 12-person leadership team got together, that, okay, they got clear and now they're aligning it downward, but they're already experiencing some pain in how they're aligning downward because of how they wrote their OKRs at the top. So an important dynamic is that this forces leadership teams communicate better. And so that's the top down. How do they communicate in a way where people see themselves in the objectives that are being written? And so after the first OKR cycle, which is a quarter, starting in the second cycle, people at lower levels start to get feedback up. And every quarter, the feedback comes up faster and in a richer format, which creates this wonderful feedback loop. Leadership aligns downward direction. The rank and file mid-level management gives feedback up and sometimes across. And the company takes a 2-week period at the beginning of every quarter to really get aligned. And I think the motion of alignment, which is explicit in OKRs, is one of the biggest differentiators between OKRs and other frameworks. Like in other frameworks, what leadership teams have to do in most frameworks is similar. Where OKR differs is what it demands of leadership with everybody else in a very explicit fashion. So I think that's an important component if you want to get bottom up OKR impact.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So, Alex, you had mentioned one of the benefits of OKRs being that they're leading indicators versus KPIs or tend to be lagging indicators. What are some other key benefits of OKRs compared to other goal setting frameworks, would you say?
Yeah, so Sarah, just so we're clear, it was actually we flip-flop that. So OKRs are lagging, KPIs are leading. And that's important because my colleagues will light me up if I don't get that one right, because we always tell our clients that we want to write objectives that focus on did we complete the objective. So I think that's important. One of the things that's critical is flexibility. So a key to getting a lot out of a goal setting framework is making it work for you and not you working for the framework. There's a lot of frameworks that are very heavy. And so, for example, in OKRs, if you read Measure What Matters, John Doerr says everyone should have 3 to 5 OKRs. What we try to teach is that you know your business and you should align the right number of OKRs down to your team. In some quarters, that might be one. In some quarters, that could be zero. And so what's implicit in OKRs is that OKRs assumes leaders know best and that you have to interpret your organizational landscape to align downward the right things. And so that obviously is reliant on a leadership team that understands those things. But I think that flexibility, to me, I think it's a big differentiator. Another key differentiator is this notion of collaboration. A lot of frameworks don't talk about how to collaborate. And I think it's really powerful in OKRs where it talks about specifically the meetings that I have to have, the cascading meetings in the beginning, and then meetings can be asynchronous. And so that collaboration that's a byproduct of the 2-week OKR planning phase, really powerful. And then the last thing, I kind of alluded to this with Jim, is this notion of the front line seeing themselves, seeing the connection to the goals or the O's and the KRs above. And in a lot of frameworks, there's not an explicit, you must align this downward. In OKRs, it's important that you align downward eventually, so not all at once, but certainly by the second quarter, you've aligned it downward to your frontline management. And the act of aligning really drives much greater alignment. And so making that explicit, I think, makes a huge difference where some goal setting frameworks are implicit. And when leaders get busy, this is where frameworks break down, that they don't align it well effectively.
Right. Before we jump into what to avoid, so I went through the exercise after reading Measure What Matters. I kind of jumped the gun and tried initiating or implementing OKRs at a departmental level, so within our marketing team. What's interesting is I created the OKRs at the top level for the marketing based on what I know for the goals for the company. And then each of the individuals created their OKRs. And what was interesting to me is when it came to creating the key results, there was a trend where the key results tended to be more to-dos or check the box tactics versus key results. So do you have any tips or guidance around, in addition to the objective, creating the key results? What makes a good key result?
So I think, and this might fall under the things to avoid when setting up OKRs. I think naturally lower level employees might not be able to measure what they're being asked to do. And so I think there's a journey, and I kind of talked about my journey of data analytics. I love to measure things. And so I think as a leader, you have to make space and time. It might take you a couple of quarters to figure out what some of your frontline members of the team could measure to really validate. So it's actually not surprising of what you shared, because that's where everybody starts.
Yeah.
And there's actually a scientific reason for that, because as human beings, the moment we think about what, we immediately go to how. And the hack that I think is really important for leaders is you have to tell them ahead of time, we're going to talk about what, but we have to resist the urge to move to how. And we have to think about at the end of the quarter, how will we define success? And success definition could start, I have to do this. And then you would coach that person by saying, I believe you're going to do that. But if you do that, what will that lead to? What will result? And so just by helping someone have a good conversation about, you're clear about what you need to do, but are you clear about how we measure success?
Yeah. Why are you doing it? What are you really trying to accomplish by doing these things? Yeah.
The answer to the why can give clues to how to measure.
Yeah, great. All right. So tell us a little bit more about the things we should avoid when setting up OKRs.
So definitely avoid rolling out to the entire company, especially the larger you are. Like, I think to me, that is a big challenge that a lot of people, I appreciate giving it a try, but I think there's a lot to be said about going slow. I think In addition, the common pitfall is too many. And I call this the curse of John Doerr. John Doerr does an amazing job of getting people enthusiastic about OKRs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody should have 3 to 5 OKRs with 3 to 5 key results each. I mean, that's an inordinate amount of KRs and Os for that matter. The reason I recommended to Jim to read Christina Woke's Radical Focus is in her book, I'll give everyone the cliff note. I'm going to spoil the end, 1 OKR. And it's a very extreme view of, hey, how do we drive focus around 1 OKR? So to some degree, it's almost the antithesis of what John Doerr is saying from the standpoint of everyone do OKRs. And I think if people read both, they can find a happy medium in between.
Yeah, I'm a believer in simple to start, right? Get adoption, start easy and simple, gain the adoption and understanding. Hopefully that's how we'll approach it as we move forward.
That happens way too much. I'm going to try not to stand on a soapbox because it's crazy to me that this happens, but people try to write OKRs in isolation. One of the things that I think is powerful about OKRs makes strategic planning a team sport. And so writing OKRs should be a team sport, not done in isolation. So just rounding out, I think it's critical for people, if they're thinking about OKRs, at least do it with a buddy, if not do it with the team. It is amazing how it can turn a meeting into a team building experience,
right?
On focusing on what matters most.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because at first I think our leadership team was looking to me by myself to create the objectives and key results. And I said, no, I think it's us together creating this and then creating the simplicity that flows both up and down so we can manage it first quarter and have a feel good potentially by it, but with some stretch goals or stretch objectives. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's probably something that we encourage people to work up to ambitious key results. I think exploring what is stretch, what does that mean, getting people aligned. I think practicing that a couple quarters gets people warmed up to do some exciting things.
I agree. It would be like, to me, it's like going to the gym and deciding going all in on your first day, full body workout, 4 sets, 20 reps, you'd quit before the end of the week. So you need to start to slowly bring in the exercise. It's the team sport, getting them ramped. I also can imagine, and this is a question, but it's also a statement, and what I feel, I'm hoping for a really positive cultural impact. And this is my hope, and maybe you could confirm my hope is going to be true, that by doing this and having it as a team sport, that everybody's invested. It isn't just checking the boxes, sending your KPIs, your scorecards in. Everybody is truly invested, and that they individually can feel how they're contributing to the overall success of the company. And to me, that has a cultural impact. Would you agree with that statement? Disagree? Change it? Edit it? Void it? Delete it?
So I'm going to stick with the gym. And so if you want to improve something, you have to put in the work. And the work has to happen, and it's not going to be quick. It has to happen over a consistent period of time. And so in OKRs, that consistency is collaboration and alignment. So we do see culture in a couple of the wins that I know we're going to talk about. Those were the wins because people were feeling more aligned. They appreciated the collaboration. One story is during the pandemic, it made a huge difference for a healthcare organization, a very large one, to really be talking about this and aligning around what was most important. And obviously in the pandemic, that obviously helping people get through it. And so when you put it in real life terms like that, it absolutely does. And the common thing is that when you have professionals who put in the work, you get what you talked about, Jim.
Yeah, that's great. And so, by the way, I was just mentioning, and it's in my head again still. So I just came back from Houston, and the president of the company that we were meeting with, really smart guy, he had been through OKRs of the previous company and said that there were some challenges, and he wants to share with me the challenges, which he and I are going to have a meeting. But maybe you can sort of elaborate. That's a horrible word. I'm not even going to pause on that for re-editing. I'm just going to let it fly out there, elaborate.
I don't know. It's actually kind of a cool word.
I like it. So we're elaborating is a new word for everybody. Just yeah, he's going to elaborate. I'm pausing there just to make sure I got it right. Elaborating. I don't know why. That's just such a lovely word. Elaborate on what the challenges were for him in his previous roles. But can maybe you elaborate as well? I'm using it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of leaders at the, not the CEO level, but the next two levels down, the writing of OKRs and aligning downward is hard. It takes practice. And if an organization doesn't invest in the team to get them the proper training, they're always going to struggle at that. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge that a lot of companies commonly run into is they don't make it clear the relationship between OKRs and performance management. So if there's any ambiguity about how my OKRs impact salary bonus, if people feel like they're tied, or maybe they're even in the case that they're not tied, if you don't speak to it, the ambiguity can cause OKRs to not be successful. So I think oftentimes starting too fast is an issue, writing an alignment of OKRs down without the skills development an issue. There's the general relationship between performance management an issue. And then sometimes it's hard to get people motivated if you're writing OKRs out of a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint deck. Like, it's not staying in front of people. If you use a platform where people need to be in it every day for 5 or 10 minutes, it starts to kind of reinforce, like, hey, I need to have what's most important to me in front of me every day. And I'm not sure if people have that front and center, because goal setting for a lot of people only happens once a year. And with OKRs, it happens more frequently, but also you got to review it frequently.
It seems like a perfect segue before, I don't mean to interrupt your question, Sarah, but the platform we've chosen is Microsoft Viva Goals. Is that one of the platforms you would suggest as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we only work with two primary platforms. Viva Goals is one, BetterWorks is the other. One of the things that I think Viva Goals has going for it is Microsoft. Microsoft makes it really easy to turn it on. You can plug it right into your Teams channel. And to me, when you're in the flow of work, that's an advantage. Microsoft was intentional for it to be a standalone OKR tool. BetterWorks, which John Doerr invested in, is all about performance enablement, continuous performance management. And so they view the world as goal setting OKRs, performance management, and they want to create a view for you of both of those things together. And so I think there's a place for that. And I think depending on the organization, I think you've got to evaluate what makes more sense. I think for most Office 365 shops, goals is a layup. It's just an easy layup. Now, over time, you might consider the alternative. And so you might consider a tool like BetterWorks on the performance management side. I think you live in software every day. You know, there's many options for every single tool.
Yep.
So to me, I think it's just navigating what makes the most sense given the environment that you're in.
And we're an Office 365 shop. And so we work in teams daily. And for those who are listening, it just sits there as an added icon on your left bar. So easy to access, easy and transparent to see consistently. That was the reason for the choice. But anyways, I'm sorry, Sarah. I interrupted a question that you had, I believe.
No, that's okay. I actually, as you were talking, Alex, it made me think of a question. So we're talking a lot about how to go about creating OKRs and the process. And I'm starting to think about the best way to measure progress against OKRs. So do you have any tips or best practices for that? Like how frequently you should be looking at the progress, who owns kind of pivoting if you're not seeing the progress you're expecting to see?
Yeah, so that's a robust set of questions, Sarah.
Can you repeat them?
I'll repeat them in terms of what I heard. So
Okay.
Thank God.
How do you track progress in OKRs? So I think there's progress for personal. I recommend everyone to look at OKRs daily for 5 minutes. To me, 5 minutes daily for your own OKRs goes a long way. For your team, I recommend that you look at it at least, depending on the size of your team, 2 to 3 times a week prior to your team meeting. So you can use the first 5 minutes of your team meeting to really showcase where you as a leader can provide assistance. Don't ask for a status because that's what the tool is for. What you want to do is get ahead, look at how they're doing, and as a leader, a servant leader perhaps, offer assistance in how you can help. And then last but not least, I think the retrospective is a critical place to really track progress and really understand how you did, because the tool will tell you the numerical, like, hey, I was 80%, 90%, 100%. But the retrospective is everyone's time of fame or shame, but we say shame in jest. It's about the learning lesson. It's about sharing, like, here's why I succeeded, or maybe I was overly ambitious this quarter. And instead of having 3 OKRs, I should only have 2. Or maybe, let's say, Sarah, you and I are in the same team. Maybe I was relying on you to deliver something, and Jim unintentionally gave you something that you had to drop what you were doing for me.
Never.
And
Never.
right. So in the retrospective, it allows us to tell the full story that maybe a spreadsheet, a PowerPoint template, or even a tool can't. So I think you have to balance how you're tracking progress for yourself, how you're tracking progress in the team. You might even take 5 minutes in a one-to-one and offer that same type of assistance. And then at the end of the quarter, you got the retrospective to really reconcile that. And so those are the things that actually help organizations get more value out of OKRs, as opposed to just setting them and, God forbid, forgetting them, which happens to a lot of people with their goals.
Right, great.
So, final question. What advice would you give to companies that are considering implementing OKRs for the first time? What would be your number one piece of advice?
So I'm going to cheat and say 3 things, if it's okay.
Okay.
Are.
So Jim,
Are. Good. That's
so
really
Jim,
good.
Jim, what you did is educate. So I think investing time in education is important. I think every company, if they can afford an OKR expert, you should get a coach. Like, with a coach, you're better than doing it independent. But part of that motion is, after you educate and maybe you get some coaching, go slow and focus, because oftentimes it takes multiple quarters. And so going too fast, and a lot of organizations don't slow down. It's this, how can you educate, go slow, and focus? To me, that's an important mantra we teach our clients. And you'll be hearing it a lot, Jim, early and often. How do you go slow, focus? You've done the education piece, great. And now it's a question of, how do we drive focus on the things that matter the most to your business?
So as we round this out, I oftentimes, you see me in the picture with my arms up, it's Growth Enablement Madness. So I feel as though I should start doing that at the end. What I want to tell the listening audience is, it's not always about things we provide. It's things that, in my situation here, I believe in. And I truly want you all to learn about OKRs, to consider it, because in my soul, if we can do this and pull this off correctly, I see us into the next evolution of our company. I will tell you that, to Alex's point, it's like going to the gym on your own. We're using the gym analogy again, not JIM, but the GYM. And, you can decide to use a personal trainer, or you can try to go on your own. And you will make far better gains with hiring a personal trainer. You're accountable. You have a program you're following. It's being documented. So that's why we've hired Alex. So, because of this belief I've had in the conversations we had, I thought we've got to hire our personal trainer. So that's Alex Bartholomaus. I said it correctly, Bartholomaus. Did I? Okay, good. Alex, tell the folks where they can find you, and how they get a hold of you should they want to have a personal trainer, so to speak.
Yeah, that's great. You can find us at www.peoplestretch.com, and you go to my page and you can actually get my number, get my email. You can email me at alex@peoplestretch.com. And so email was alex@peoplestretch.com, or the website is peoplestretch.com. And we've got a bunch of ways for you to reach out to us to set up some time to talk about OKRs.
That's awesome. Thank you, Alex, for joining us today. As always, I want to give some credits out there. We want to thank Connor O'Keefe as our producer. I want to thank Sarah as my co-host. She brought some of the laughs today. She can do better. I know she'll work on the laughing later for our next episode. I neglect to do this, but I want to thank my son, James S. Ward IV, known as Sam Ward, who's a professional musician, drummer, and out in Las Vegas performing, but he does the intro music for us. So thank you and giving him credit for that. Great show. I really appreciate you taking your time. And folks out there in the listening land, you can find this podcast and wherever podcasts are found. Apple, Google, Spotify, all that stuff. But please listen to it. I don't know. I'm talking to nobody right now. I'm saying please listen to it. But I think you'll really find a tremendous amount of benefit from OKRs and using it and getting a personal trainer like Alex. Don't kid yourself. It's going to be a bit hard, and be prepared to put the work in. If you're not prepared to put the work in, then you're not going to get the results. And that's the way it goes with gym work. It goes with dieting. It goes with all that stuff in life. So with that, I say goodbye for now. We'll see you at the next episode. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for listening to this episode of Growth Enablement Madness podcast. I also want to thank Divinio Podcast for this episode's production and distribution. Finally, thank you to Sam Ward for our musical introduction and outro. Be sure to check out all of our episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. New episodes are available monthly and cover all important topics for growing and scaling your business. Until next time, this is Jim Ward signing off. Let's grow.